Start. All right. SNAFU Podcast number 5 with Drew Hannen from Project 44. Welcome, Drew. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Joey. Just enjoying the Canadian summer here. And how about you?
I'm doing great. It's a nice Dutch summer here with sometimes rain, lots of rain. It's actually it's I think there has been a lot of rain in the last couple of days. But yeah, great to have you on here. Today we're gonna talk about maps, and because I love maps, I wrote my thesis about World War II maps in World War One and World War Two. But what you are doing, you are a GIS consultant, and you are one of the founders of Project 44. And I think Project 44, people might have not heard about it, but I think it's an amazing project where you digitized a lot of World War Two maps. Um, but first, let's talk about you. What you are a GIS consultant. What is a GIS consultant?
So I help people make maps, right? So if
Right.
you want to have a paper map made, I can help you, with visualizing the type of information you'd want to show on a map. I can also, we can put a GIS consultant with specialized with, storing types of information that require coordinates, such as, uh, such as locations of areas and, so on and so forth. But a GIS consultant pretty much just specializes in all things maps,
I
right?
see.
So
Right.
I can really go off on a long thing on what it means to be a GIS consultant, but it's a map.
If I remember, it's a
Yeah,
geospatial information. Oh, geographic, right?
geographic information system. So a computer program that's specialized in storing geographic information, such as locations of homes, anything that has location in the sense, right? Anything that can be tied down to an area on Earth.
Right. Now, people might not see the connection with World War II right away, so we're gonna talk about Project 44, a project that you started, and they will probably see how it connects with being a GIS consultant later on. So let's talk about Project 44. What is Project 44?
So, my love for maps, was really sort of what got me started on researching maps from the Second World War, because I was really curious to see how before the era of the computer, obviously 75 years ago in the Second World War, how spatial information would be shown on maps, right?
Right.
So this is so key in terms of, emphasizing the relationships between elements of, physical geography, human geography, regions, rivers, lakes. It's really, you're almost, people take for granted Google Maps now, like you go on the internet and you can pull up a map of anywhere really detailed, and it'll show you the location of McDonald's or the location of a car dealership. But back 75 years ago, people had to look at paper documents to figure out where to go, right? And
Exactly.
These maps had to be accurate in the sense that they showed what the geography was like, and also accurate in terms of scale for distances, heights, for crossing rivers and bridges and all that type of good stuff. So, when I and Nathan and I, the co-founders of Project 44, we met at the Library and Archives Canada, and we were interested to see what sort of archival collections from the Second World War would show in terms of the quality of their maps. And we were just really blown away with the amount of details that were shown on these maps. And obviously they were critical to pointing out or providing a strategic advantage over the enemy, right? So
Right. What did you encounter? What kind of map? What sort of maps did you encounter? What?
So I wanted to. The first set of maps I ever pulled was a map from the capitulation of Hong Kong, which I think was in 1942 in December. Hong Kong was a British colony, and there was Canadians, British, and I think Indian troops stationed there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see if there would be any documents left over that would show the locations of defensive positions or artillery pieces on the islands in and around Hong Kong, because it was a pretty valuable harbor.
Right.
And I was blown away with some of the maps that I found and how well, preserved and documented they sort of thought out their defense plan, and obviously it was a surprise attack, and it did not last too long, the battle, but there was preparation taken for this, and the maps showed that.
I'm not so up to date, but what year is Hong Kong? When was that? Is that World War II?
1940. I think actually, yeah. No, it's like the day after Pearl Harbor.
Okay. Oh, of course. Right.
So it's when the Japanese went on the offensive during the Second World War, Battle of Hong Kong. So it's December 8th to December 25th.
Right. You're actually making a good point here. That's something that I realized, and I don't think a lot of other people do not yet realize, but that the mapping of the first part of the 20th century was so advanced, something that we cannot grasp our heads around because we have something like Google Maps, something that we go on a website and we know exactly where we are, what is around us, and that was not the case in those years, especially First World War.
Yeah, and like it all really started, I guess you researched this in your thesis, but in World War I with trying to provide accurate locations for trench lines, the invention of the plane a few years earlier, aerial photography.
Right.
And that stuff sort of, rapidly proved that you needed to have accurate maps to win battles, right?
Right.
So, you can, it's just, we take computers, and maps, Google Maps for granted when, guys 100 years ago were drawing maps by hand from photographs. And it's really, I'm going to show you some maps later, but it's really mind-blowing to see what types of details you can get on them.
Right. So if we then go to Project 44, what is Project 44?
So, it's a great transition. So when Nathan and I were at the archives, we sort of dreamt up this idea of like being able to follow Canadian troops as they fought their way from Normandy all the way through the liberation of Holland.
Right.
And for me, like it was personal because my paternal grandfather served in the Second World War, and he passed away before I was born and when my father was younger, but he played a role in, the fight. And I had limited knowledge of where he spent his time, when he spent his time,
mm-hmm.
and, the engagements that the Canadian Army was engaged in. And I thought if we can find information that proved or that shows where these units are located, and we gathered all this information for every single Canadian unit and put it on a map and showed it to people, then you can start to see how the campaign went. And obviously not everything is captured in paperwork that's found in archives, but a lot of good information is. And that's really like we just saw potential in this to make a GIS project, to create data out of World War II documents. So,
right.
And we started there, and a lot of hard work. yeah, no, so we started with Normandy. We had a goal. We wanted to have the first edition of the website launched for 2019 D-Day.
Right.
We did that. It covered 87 days of combat, June 6th till August 30th, 1944. And yeah, no, that was really crazy. And once you see something that cool, like we just had to continue to the next, the August 44 to May 45, right? So
Right.
that's the next challenge.
Yeah, so I'm letting them show part. I just started up your website, the project44.ca, and then on the web map, it is crazy because I loved when you shared the first one of the first how do you say it, versions of the map. As you said, you had June 6th mapped throughout August 1944, and so
Yeah.
basically what you guys have done is you collected all of the spatial data from World War II documents and maps and put this in one single web application so that we can follow every unit day by day. And if you look at, I have the settings are, I think I have to change some filters over here, but you can follow the front line day by day, and every single unit that you have on there is also you can follow them, and that is crazy in my opinion, and it's in a good way crazy.
Well, the backbone of this project is like the ability for the Allies to gather spatial location information more accurately than the Germans, and you can see that perfectly in 12th Army Group situation maps, which are maps that were made every single day of the Northwest European campaign from June 6th
right
till well after the Second World War.
Right.
And, from high up, I'm talking Eisenhower, Omar Bradley level, Bernard Montgomery level. These guys were looking at these documents every day to see what the situation was of the front and what assets they had at their disposal to sort of, go down the chain and say, okay, well, yeah, I want 3 armored divisions punched through, the Siegfried line today.
Right.
So, that document, is really amazing.
Do you have an example of the 12th Army?
Yeah, I'll show you.
Because I think those are crazy. I say crazy a lot, but I think they're a wonderful thing. I believe they're out there somewhere on the internet, but
oh yeah. Well, these are from the Library of Congress, so you can see here a situation at the end of the day on June 29th, 1944. You can see every divisional level and up unit every single day.
Oh wow.
And if I go over to Project 44, and I go to June 29th, I can see that all that information and hover over it.
Oh right. You basically you collected. Oh wow.
So yeah, that served as the basis to capture our allies, and for the Canadian units, it was really archival documents, and anyways, it's you can click on every single Canadian unit and read what was going on that day for them, and we're hoping to capture more of this information in the future for our allies for sure.
Right. So. Yeah, that's the crazy thing in my opinion. You have done all of the Canadian stuff, and you're a Canadian association. But once the that's great and that's amazing, but if the United States the archival documents for those units, it is huge. It's gonna take
So
such a long time to digitize all of that. But I think this is a wonderful first step in the direction of new ways of telling and passing on history. People, because this we are, I almost feel like a it's almost feels like a time travel machine or something to me. You're viewing the war from above as it was on that day, and you can you have that aerial overlay feature on you as a base map thing, and you know if that's going to be expanded throughout all of Europe one day, that's
yeah, well, that would be my dream. I've dreamed about that. There are collections out there that are quite large and cover, pretty populous areas in Holland because, as you guys, you can go anywhere in Holland and dig up something and you might find a grenade or, a shell, like, any sort of major area of conflict was subjected to heavy aerial bombardment, artillery
right.
bombardment, all that type of stuff. So, aerial photos are like key to have literally that Google map of the time, right?
Exactly.
So, do you want to see what the Arnhem Bridge looked like on September 19th or 14th? You can see it. I'm pretty sure you'd see parachutes everywhere and gliders and stuff. So. But yeah, no, it's high quality stuff in the maps, like you said. It really allows you to sort of step into the mind of the soldier, and see, maybe how they would have seen, the documents, or maybe a map one day that would say like, okay, well, this is where we are, like definitely the officers were working with maps regularly.
Yeah, I believe by 1940, map reading was almost a mandatory thing. But like as the war went on and the need for replacement was bigger, I think they skipped out on the map reading for even like for soldiers. But there was a an army manual for sure. But officers were definitely they had to read maps. They had to spot and gather intelligence as much as possible, and that shows, if we look at archival documents, in my opinion, that just shows how much maps and the working of maps are interwoven in military tactics. Almost everything you do on the battlefield. That was we during my master's program. There was this saying that before the modern wars, like the closer someone got to the battlefield, the less control a general had over his troops, right?
Yeah.
So, and that if you look at like from the 1500s to, and then you speed up to World War II and World War I, you see that these maps are creating a sort of better control of your troops and control of the terrain on a much closer distance to the battlefield. These maps really help people to know where they are and where the troops are, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, but that's I think it's I also I like you, I love maps. I love talking about maps. But I have some documents that I want to show myself. Those that I think are really cool. I think I've shared them with you once or twice, and that is basically I think you can agree on this. And as you said, there was aerial photography on a daily basis in World War II, right?
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
So so when I was doing research on my favorite U.S. unit, the 5th Infantry Division, I basically found these documents where they got daily reports of a photo interpretation team that belonged to the division or a neighboring division, and like what I'm showing on my screen right now. I'm not sure you are seeing that, but I shared them with you before. It's like 3 pages long of of enemy locations and gun emplacements, and every day they come up with a new report of the whole area, and it's like it's so much. It's so bizarre almost, like about how those maps were a key in spotting the enemy and knowing where the enemy is and knowing where your own troops are. That the more you realize that, the more you think that everything is researchable, and there's so much data about war that we can find in archive documents.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's like during Normandy, the build up to Normandy, map making and the ability to gather intelligence on the European, mainland Nazi Europe was so critical. Like last year, we had a chance to actually sit down with a veteran, George Fouchard, who served in a survey company. Wow. And he was drawing maps about 20 kilometers behind the line, 15 miles or something like that. And he was telling us that before Normandy, he was isolated with other survey company members, and they were drawing maps for the upcoming invasion of Europe. Wow. And he could not even go to the bathroom alone without being followed by an armed guard, because it was that important to have, an edge, or at least an idea of what you're going into, right? Like there's no satellites back, 75 years ago. If you want to take a picture of something, you got to go over to Europe, exactly. Risk getting shot down to take pictures, right? So right. George is like an inspiration for us, because after his career as in the survey company, he went on to work in Natural Resources Canada and built many base maps of the Canadian North.
Oh, wow.
So he was one of those guys who was actually looking at a photograph that would have been analyzed by an intelligence imagery analyst. Say, okay, make these features on this particular road. And then he would draw that. They would make it into etch it into a steel plate, and then it would be printed on, a huge press printer that would be hauled around in the back of a, massive military grade dump truck, or a troop transport or something like that, right? So he also said that there was planes that were flying over the battlefield, taking photos of battles that were happening, that they would fly over to an area and eject the film from the camera into a net. They would develop the photographs in theater, and then the intelligence guys would analyze everything, find where the enemy was hiding, and then they'd send them, like I said, over to George, and George would print it off in a few hours. So it's really we have a lot to look up to when it comes to cartographic inspiration when you look at World War II.
Yeah, it's in my opinion, it's truly fascinating. And you might be able to give an answer on this because we looked at all this mapping, and United States putting so much effort on in this. I think there's like more than 600 million maps printed. I'm not sure of the exact number, but it's really interesting to compare this. 600 million maps by Allied troops, but to compare this with German troops. I have a lesser knowledge about German maps and mapping. Maybe you are able to give more
I
information about that.
well, I knew what Mr. Fouchard thought of German maps. He said they look like drawings. So he uh, he had a few, and there was obviously shortages of raw materials in Nazi Germany towards the end of 44 and 45, and he showed us a map that was printed on the back of a newspaper,
Uh-huh.
just in black and white ink because there's no ink available, right?
Right.
So you could only imagine, like going into battle with, at least some degree of confidence to know what, the size is of a river or the height of a hill. Like all that information is key in terms of tactics. And, I've seen German maps, and they're
You have you
accurate, fine, but it's a different style of, you know,
do you have examples of a German map?
Um, let me get back to you on that one. I have some other cool maps that I can show you, but I can
Sure.
definitely pull something up in another screen sharing thing.
Sure, no problem.
So, like you're mentioning before, being able to capture all of this information was so important to this is that. Can you see?
I can
This,
definitely see that. Yes. Oh wow.
so this would have been an Allied map that would have shown obviously enemy supply and administrative districts of France prior to the buildup, right?
Right.
Ammo dumps, pet dumps, engineer stores, rations, but all this. So you can see that, on a higher level, obviously this is sort of meant to generalize information and it's not sort of as detailed as some of the different scales, but this is key to know where some of the assets are of the German army, right? As you can
Right.
see here, one, so they probably have one of each, right? And then the beaches and so on and so forth. And, this is just enemy supply administration. This isn't even defensive features, right?
Right. So they probably send out bombers or
Well, yeah,
maybe even
and
fighter planes, like small dive bombers to go and bomb these places.
yeah, or you can even see ammo dump, right? If you're, if you
Right.
could find that on a 1 to 25,000 map, you could have a pretty good, chance of hitting that ammo dump in that area, right?
Exactly.
So that's one, like this one topographical map. So it shows soil types
Huh.
in Normandy, right?
Right.
So, descriptions of, and this is obviously important when you're, Germans didn't place any armor east of the Orne River because it was heavily inundated, right?
Right.
So,
All right. I
and this
see
is
that.
6th Airborne Division dropped in this area, right, to secure these bridges to make sure that nobody would come through this side because they, the Allies knew you couldn't get a Panther tank through here or Panzer IV or any of that, right? It would just
Right.
get down and become a target for strafing fighters. So
That is super interesting. That really brings you to the eye of the to the general, maybe the guy who plans the attacks, the
yeah,
strategic planning for battles.
so this is a little bit further south from Caen, and this I think is sort of showing locations of yeah.
That's pretty. Those are gun positions as well.
I think these are hedges and treed areas,
Oh, I
right?
see.
So clusters of trees,
Oh,
passable but difficult
oh, I
woods,
see. Oh, wow. I see now.
impassable woods in, you know,
Right. Huh.
So let's see what else I have. Yeah, here's a good one. Uh, Roads, railways, and communication. So this is the routes that the Germans would have used to sort of ferry troops to and from, the east to west, right? You can see that
Right.
on via highway here, going down and yeah, so you can think there's even so rail lines, right? Rail network of Normandy. You can tell that how important that is, right?
Right.
How are you going to transport a Tiger tank from Germany to France quickly? You're going to use railroads, right?
Exactly.
So
If you bomb one railroad, they cannot get.
yeah.
uh,
Apparently though you can build railroads pretty quickly though. Like
uh-huh.
overnight. Here's just another one. Profiles of valleys, right?
Right.
So this would be a valley type feature that's found on a topographic map, and then if you were to turn it to the sideways, you can the side, and obviously you don't have like a 3D map. This is what the elevation would look like, right?
Wow. That is a crazy
These
amount of
are
data.
all really these are these are some of the best sort of high level maps that I've really come across.
Right.
Bridge widths, lengths, uh, so
Wow. I've never seen all these maps that you just shown. I don't think I've ever seen them, but it makes things so much clearer when we look at battles and we ask ourselves, why did the battles took place here? Or why did the unit did an assault crossing right here in this location? It makes so much more sense now. And I
yes.
always wonder now. I'm also wondering what historians that are writing books, um, about battles. There's plenty of guys out there. Um, one of the famous guy. What's his name? There's one famous Battle of the Bulge historian. There's like Peter Keddick Adams, and there's one other guy. Let me quickly find his name.
So this is the thing is we we feel like maps are never integrated well into books, right? Like
Right.
stuff is written about in immense detail, and then you get to see the map, and it's fit on a 11 a small page, right? And you're
Right.
like, where's the detail that they're talking about? So
Right.
that literally was one of the catalysts for starting Project 44. Was like, okay, we saw these maps. Uh, how do we get more of them, and how do they help us better understand what Canadians went through, right? So
Right. And so you guys, what did you then do? Like you guys got a plan. You had, um, how did you gather all that data? Did you sit at archives for days?
well, we're really fortunate that and as this is the case with some U.S. units, there's volunteers out there who have done a lot of digitization and have thought of ideas like this before.
Mm-hmm.
And it all starts when you have a digital copy of a document, right? You don't have to handle a piece of paper to do work on it. You can have it on your desktop, and you can sit down and you know uh, start to do your research. And that's really like to have that, you need somebody who's dedicated, who's going to spend many hours of scanning information, as Joey, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's it's really yeah, no, it just takes time to gather your collection, and then you think about it, and then you're like, okay, well, now I have a consistent amount of documents right across the board, so I can start to go lift coordinate information from every single diary, right? And then I can have a good quality document, and I can convert it into text. and that's where you can start to search stuff. You want to find your grandfather's name,
Right.
type it into Project 44, or one of our war diary documents, and if his name's in there, you'll find it, right? So
Right. And so, what is currently you guys have digitized all the Canadian units from Normandy to VE Day. What is the next step?
So it's a great question. We want to move to the Italian campaign because it's typically an afterthought, and there is a lot of Allied involvement, American, British, other Commonwealth countries, Polish, that fought in Italy, and it was a brutal campaign. And there's just as much information, I'm sure, about Italy as there is for Normandy,
Right.
and more, and any theater of the Second World War, Pacific, Eastern Front. You'd be surprised. So
yeah, that's pretty interesting. The Russians.
yeah. Well, you can Google Russian style maps, and you'd find the Russian style cartography, and it's different from the German style, and it's different from the Allied style, right? It's just
Right.
like something you see when you start to look at the details really closely, right? So
Right.
just want to show you, here's a great area that's pretty not too close to you, but
yeah, the Rexwald, the Rex Forest.
Yeah. So this was the start of Operation Veritable and Blockbuster and all that push into the Rhine, right?
Wow.
So taking the Reichwald was a pretty key objective, and you can see obviously all the defensive features to the west would be Grossbeek Heights, Nijmegen, Arnhem.
Oh yeah.
So you can see all these lines and arrows or machine guns, anti-tank guns, anti-aircraft guns, artillery pieces.
That is so.
And this would have all been derived from aerial photos, and you can see edition January 20th.
Right.
The Brits and the Canadians went through this area about a month later, towards the end of February, beginning of March. And they went south and east and across the Rhine River. But there are some pretty heavily defended areas, and this is obviously right on the doorstep of Germany. So it was heavily defended, and Clev is in Germany also. So.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's where, around that area is where the German West Wall starts. But it's
and maybe sort of features of the West Wall, right? So like here you can see maps from the end of the Second World War, late May, but this is the location of German troops that are still stationed in coastal gun batteries and so on and so
forth. Wow, that's great. That's wait, when is that?
Like May 17th, maybe.
Oh wow.
12 hours.
Wait, that's after VE Day.
Or is that... Well, they were still, exactly.
Oh, yeah, those are the. I think I know that. Yeah, I think I know what that.
Well, there's a lot of. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of soldiers to go through, but they didn't all surrender at once, right? So it was pretty strategic, So, anyways, it's all cool stuff.
Right. So
I'm trying to find a German map for you, but I can't pull one up. But I'll see if I can pull something cool up on Google.
Oh, that's all right. Let's talk about a story map, because that is something else that you guys provide, and I think is a wonderful way to tell a personal story of a World War II soldier through a web map.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I'll just share with you my screen here.
All
We
right.
recently did another update where you can see a story map menu. So you can see some of the featured story maps we've worked on.
Wow.
We just had one come online, Operation Neptune, Juno Beach. But this was the one that started us all. This is Lance Corporal George Pullard. When Nathan and I were digitizing last year at the archives in Canada, we were digitizing a unit that we'd never come across a digital copy of this, and we'd asked everybody and we couldn't find it, so we had to go down to Ottawa, a few hours away for both of us, and scan George Pullard's unit.
Right.
And one of our volunteers actually, is the nephew of Lance Corporal Pullard,
Wow.
and he wrote a book about the Lance Corporal Pullard, and it sort of starts out with his journey as a young man in Cornwall. I'll zoom out a bit so you can see where this is, right? So, you're obviously the Netherlands. Cornwall is on the St. Lawrence River.
Cornwall,
East
Canada.
an hour away from me. And he joined up a unit called the Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry Highlanders. And he got deployed to England, where he trained for about 3 or 4 years. And he was part of 9th Infantry Brigade, which on the morning of June 6th made its way across the English Channel and would be the last Canadian infantry unit, or the last Canadian infantry brigade to land that day in Juno, later on in the afternoon. So yeah, we started scanning all these documents. We were aware of the story of Lance Corporal Pullard, and when we came across the war diaries in Ottawa, we found that there was actually documents that talked about the night that Lance Corporal Pullard and another officer went missing on a patrol around Buron, which is about 10 to 15 kilometers, I want to say 10 miles in on Juno Beach.
Right.
So you can see right here, it's Caron. So it's
I love how you scroll along and then the map takes you to the to the point that you're talking about.
Yeah, so, and you can see here, Joey, there's like a great example. This is a map we found in the unit that talks about Vieux-Caron. I don't know if you can see, it's probably too small, but it's the town right here. And some soldier had gone in and drawn the elevation features of the slope that was in front of him, because it sort of gradually rose towards the German positions a few hundred meters in front of him, right?
Right.
So on the night of, you can see a site sketch. This is all stuff that we found in the archives that had sort of never been seen before, and we're going looking for their narrative to find out the coordinates of where they were on particular dates, and then here we're hopping right into a super personal connection to us and the story of their uncle, right? And these documents put us in the exact place where that patrol started last year in Normandy, right? Wow. And Nathan and I stood at the bottom of this hill, or maybe a little bit over here, and we walked the position of this patrol that Lieutenant Williams and Lance Corporal Pullard went missing on. So, here's the patrol report. They made it up this little valley, and all these positions at the top of this slope. You can't see it on this map, but there's elevation here, are German machine gun positions. So Lance Corporal Pullard and his patrol went up on a mission to destroy tanks. They tripped 2 tripwires that set off strobe lights pointing in the directions of the Germans, so the Germans knew something was coming because these lights, started to flash as the one soldier crossed it. It sort of, okay, they're coming up the hill or whatever. And anyways, all hell broke loose. All these positions up here outside Grouchy decimated the patrol that night. And as the ambush was sort of or as the patrol was ambushed, some soldiers made it back towards the bottom of the hill near Caron. They made it back one by one, but Corporal Pullard and Lieutenant Williams were missing. They had been taken prisoner by 12th SS units in the area.
Wow.
They'd been brought to the regimental headquarters where they were subsequently executed with 19 other Canadians.
Really?
Yeah. So,
wow.
To see literally the route that they took before they were picked up and murdered by German soldiers is, this area is probably less than a mile and a half, right?
Right.
So, anyways, this is the great thing about the story map. I know it's like telling the story here because it's amazing, but
it's wonderful.
The finer details. This type of tool is great to sort of tell exactly somebody's footsteps that they took,
right?
Where they started, where they ended, and then you start to throw in, data, right? So you can see right here on, this is, sorry, let me just orient myself.
It's okay.
So here, Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry Highlanders, they were stationed here for a few weeks for sure, because Caen was very heavily contested. As you can see, there's 21st Panzer Division, 716th, elements of 12th SS right here.
Right.
Yeah, so this is that high ground before Caen, anyways, and you can even read to see what was going on that particular day. And I don't want to pick the wrong day or whatever, but it's in and around June 14th or to 6th. Let me check.
It is wonderful. It's just wonderful how everything connects to each other. It's
well, and the maps, the central part of that, right? Without the World War II map, you're nowhere, right?
Right.
So
I think that brings us to an interesting part of the maps, and a very an important part that I write about in my thesis as well. What I say is there are two great developments that happen and allow us to reconstruct all of this. Is the coordinates.
Oh, right? Yeah.
So first, the coordinate system that was used back then, it's also something that was found in World War I by French artillery, but it's being used. It was then being used by British troops, and it was so useful because people could do anything with coordinates. They could refer to every point on the land.
Yeah, well, this is I just want to sort of, you brought up a coordinate question that's, or just a point, and they didn't use the same coordinate system they use today. Exactly. Right? So you need, there's a website out there, echodelta.net or something,
right?
You know which map sheet you need to be in, and so on and so forth. So what we needed to do, and since we're GIS guys, Nathan and I, if you stitch all these maps together and you stretch them out, you can get the coordinate on top of what is land now, right?
Right.
So you can, and the maps are accurate enough. right? The Allied ones for sure, and you can really start to sort of get into that coordinates as you're talking about, right?
Right.
So right here, north, south, east, west, and that's what allows you to sort of tie in and get really close. Some units are better than others at locating themselves on a map, but for the most part, there was somebody there who knew exactly where they were
Right.
to 100 feet or something, or 100 yards. So
Right. Exactly.
it's this is you know this is something that was uniform with the Allies, right? So you could only imagine how useful that is. It comes when sort of coordinating. Like here you can see this is we don't have it here, but the division between the 21st Army Group and the 12th Army Group, right? The American
Right.
sector, British and Canadian sector.
Right.
So to have a common understanding of coordinates and to accurately pin yourself on a map from World War II or on a map 75 years ago was critical to winning the war for sure.
Exactly. Something that I discovered as well when I was doing research for my thesis is basically how less there was written about maps, even though they were such an important part of warfare and the Second World War itself. Um, and something that I really liked seeing was that not only was the coordinate system, the grid system, used by the army of all allied armies, but it also allowed to if that grid system was universally known and accepted and used, ground and air support, they could support each other in crazy ways, and having a tactical advantage over the enemy. Um, that is what you see
Uh,
with these. That's what I found in studying my in the Fifth Infantry Division, when there were these special tactical air command units where uh, you know um, fighter squadrons were coordinating with infantry troops and armored troops against the Germans, and it's like, oh my god. There's several veteran accounts who also talk about that, like about how they were radio. There was a guy that was responsible for radioing the enemy's location to the tactical air units, and then a fighter unit would come in and try to attack that location, and that is, like I
well,
said.
that's so invaluable, right? That capability. Germans were very good at picking apart small, bigger fighting units and putting them together into more powerful battle groups. And towards the end of the war, a lot of the Allies were fighting in smaller sort of combat team battle groups
Right.
and were very successful. But to have the Allied Air Force only a radio call away, and then there's obviously more work that goes in behind the scene with the tactical air support people, right? But
Right.
you start to see those guys show up in Normandy for sure, and they played a huge role in
Right.
that campaign. So
Right. So before we finish the talk, there's a person that inspired you to do all of this. I mean, there's probably more persons, but I believe your grandfather was a big inspiration for you
yeah,
to do this.
no, for sure. My grandfather was in the 22nd Canadian Armored Regiment, and he was an officer, and he got seconded to staff duty, and he served on general ops in the 1st Canadian Army HQ. So he was around maps a lot, and I was going through some of his stuff, a few years ago, and what did I find at the bottom of his box was all of his maps, right? So he
Wow.
had a map from Normandy, scale of 1 to 100,000. So the scale that I was showing you, I'm not, he was obviously as part of a staff supporting a general very closely in executing plans. But yeah, no, that's what I've sort of found out in the past 2 years of doing research. I found out a lot more about the role that he would have played, and he came back to Canada, and he actually was the commanding officer of his unit when they came back from the Second World War. So,
Wow.
yeah, no, it's really that's an inspiration. I was also heavily inspired with my mentor, Bill Kemp, who sort of turned me on to the power of maps and how they can be used to store information. And he worked a lot with First Nations groups in Canada to sort of collect information and put it in a computer system so you could make maps to show like, okay, well, you can't just build a pipeline through this area because this is next to a critical river that our ancestors have been harvesting for 800 years.
Right.
So once you collect that information, you start to sort of make a knowledge base that can be tied back hundreds of years. And well, not hundreds of years, but like he was doing this in the 70s, and he was interviewing elders who were born in like 1875, right?
Right.
So you
Oh, wow.
what life was like back then, and then you have somebody coming by in the 70s and saying, okay, can you put this information on a map, and then we'll copy it, and then we'll put it into a database, and then we'll have a structure behind it, and then all of a sudden all of the elders in the community can show their spots, and that sort of was a huge inspiration. It's like, man, what's the story of my grandfather?
Right.
How come I don't, like, where do I have to go to find out details about that? Like in really intense details, and the only place you can go is the archives and get those documents, and that's it's so critical to you think you can get it all in a book. Yeah, you can get a lot of details, but armies didn't operate like chapters in a book. There's a lot of paperwork that goes involved.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, no, it's just that's the and I hope everybody who watches this, who has some sort of relative in a U.S. unit, and I know, Joey, you've done some work for us. You've mapped the infantry regiments of the 80th Infantry Division. We're working on getting those up, but we built a resource that we'd like people to start to contribute this information so we can put it in one place, not charge for it, and just show this is what happened back then on a map.
Right.
So that's everybody who has a question, where'd my grandfather serve, what did he do, when did he do it, it's all
So were you able to trace your grandfather's route when you
well, yeah, I don't have all the paperwork from 1st Canadian Army because it's a lot of paperwork, but I have this map. I don't know if I'll be able to do it with my screen
we'll see.
shared. No, you won't be able to do it.
You gotta keep moving. You gotta keep moving it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, it's a map that was made after the fact that shows the route of the unit where they went, sort of like the map that Myra showed in her first podcast.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I can see the dates. I know roughly where it is. And he moved obviously behind the front line and stuff. But it's interesting. I come across paperwork that has his signature on it from sort of Army routine paperwork. So it's finding out a way to sort of capture this information in an accessible way, visualize it, and I think that's going to help preserve the memory of World War II into the future, and for the next generation of kids who are maybe a little bit more comfortable with an iPad than reading, Stephen Ambrose's Longest Day or something, or Cornelius Ryan's Longest Day, right? So
Right. I think that's the most important message here. So we are digitizing all these documents, but we are also preserving all of this history that you have you collect all the archive material, but we are somehow preserving historical information in a
yeah,
digital way, and people are gonna be able to access that information through a computer screen, and they don't have to go to an archive to read through all of it and understand everything.
yeah, and you know what, and not have to put their hands on the original documents, so that an archive can actually be an archive and protect documents.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
you make a digital copy. I could print out any one of those maps, and it's not going to be one that was issued in 1944, but it's going to have all the details and resolution in there, right? So
Right.
yeah, no, it's exciting stuff. I hope to continue to do this type of work, continue to build Project 44. We have, like you're saying, who's contributing some data coming up. We have Federico Piriani, who's out of Milan, who specializes in heavy panzer battalions. He's mapped a few heavy panzer units in Normandy. And there's other people we're working with that we're trying to get some British units up there. But if you have a copy of the electronic document, you're in business, right? Like that's where the work starts. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So what is the end goal? Just to have everything mapped?
I don't know, like just to continue to develop ways to sort of store information about World War II online on a map, I think is incredibly important.
Right.
Some of the new stuff that we've done is we have done geotagging photos, which is something that's huge. I know you're into that, the photos and stuff, and obviously the guys in North America are not, we can't go out on the weekend and drive to Normandy, right? So it's really, we can start to add photos to this, to know where exactly photos were taken, right?
It's almost like me playing along with Google Maps and adding the photos to them, but then in a much more World War II friendlier digital environment, I would say.
Well, yeah, and like the other day I asked you showed me this actually, and I was blown away with all these German propaganda photos. And
yeah.
I went on the internet and I started cruising Facebook groups, and I was like, hey, where is this? And if this is right, the date here, so it's June 10th.
Right.
British Airborne, 4 days after D-Day. British Airborne's here. That photo's taken here. Right. That's pretty far away.
That is pretty far away. Wow.
So I'm not trying to plug the project or anything, but we have not this one. Distance, right? So that's like 26 kilometers away.
Wow, that is amazing.
So,
and we just have to wonder how they got there. I imagine by walking, but
or they overshot their drop zone.
All right,
landed somewhere around here or here, and then they're just trying to get they're paratroopers, right? They fight more furiously when they're completely surrounded, right? So like if they link up with their buddies, they could be a threat pretty quickly. So I think you'd want to get them as far away from the front as possible to eliminate like any problems, right? So anyways, I found this, somebody sent me a picture of that exact church.
Right. So that is wonderful.
Yeah, these are the directions we're moving, making more user friendly, get more people on it, and just to have fun with maps and to realize that it's a critical role to understanding, this World War II.
Yeah, just understanding the whole war. It's thank you so much for coming out today and
You can see right here, Operation Cobra, American testing out of Normandy,
right,
starting the encirclement of Falaise. We have where the base map ends, but yeah,
that is super fascinating. It's like you are just allowed to play with the timeline and see how all the units move day by day.
Well, yeah, and it's pretty. I'm not saying it's the craziest, most accurate for enemy positions, German positions.
Right.
It's pretty good for Allied positions. It was good enough for Bradley and Eisenhower. So,
Yeah, we're basically watching through their eyes.
Yeah, exactly. And knowing that, oh yeah, well, the Germans, they're going to go across the Seine, right?
Right.
And once they go to the Seine, where are they going to hold up? Or they they went all the way back to Holland, right?
Right.
And then held up on the border of Germany and Belgium and Luxembourg.
Right.
So,
yeah, that part is so fast. Like if you see them breaking out of Normandy, it's crazy.
Well, and then you start to think like, boom. Okay, Market Garden, good time to do it. Maybe the Germans are really on their heels.
I understand now why now it makes more sense why they did it so fast, because they saw the Germans retreating so fast.
So yeah, September 12th, you can see Market Garden taking place.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome.
So, and you're big into that in Holland. I know Market Garden,
right.
101st, 7th Armored, Guards Armored,
Wow.
All those all those super important units that, and then you can see there's the Nijmegen salient.
Yep.
And then it's up to the Canadians to clear the Scheldt, this area.
Exactly. Right?
Wow. So, anyways, always a pleasure talking, Joey.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling the story of Project 44. We've already been talking more than an hour. It's crazy how fast that goes.
Yeah, well, fun flies when you're having fun, right? So.
Right, that's the most important part. So I'm pretty sure we're gonna talk with Nathan later on in the series, and I'm looking forward to that too. And I also look forward to when because I've been working on a map, on a Pacific map, to share that with you and to share that with Project 44 and.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
Combine how do you say that? Combine powers.
It would. Pacific is super interesting. We're going to be diving into them next year with the first Special Service Brigade, which was a Canadian-American unit. Those guys were fighting in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, and then in Italy, right? Monte Cassino, Monte Defensa, all those. That could be a really interesting. Map to make. It's going to span crazy continents. Those guys trained in Washington, up in Alaska, then to southern Italy and Sardinia, and wild stories.
Wild stories to come. All right, thank you so much. They can check out your website at project44.ca, and their Instagram of Project 44 is right here on the screen, so they can click that and they can check the description.
And Facebook also, we haven't been posting as much on.
Right. If people feel like volunteering, they can contact you.
Info at Project 44. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them and spend a little bit of time looking at those questions. So project44.ca. World War II maps are really interesting and highly detailed.
All right. Thank you. That was SNAFU Podcast number 5.
Take care, Joey.
Take care, man. Bye.